conspired with numerous other individuals in and outside of Alaska, including juveniles, forever altering everybody's life. This never would have happened if it weren't for Denali Bremer.
What do you do when your child doesn't pick up the phone? It's a situation every parent fears, and Timothy Hoffman was no exception. When his 19-year-old daughter Cynthia disappeared one weekend in June 2019, he was left scouring the countryside and looking to her friends for answers. But did they know more than they were saying? And could this picturesque Alaska hiking trail be the site of a hideous murder? Cynthia was a trusting young woman, and when that trust was taken advantage of, it had disastrous consequences. A web of lies, a group conspiracy, and a catfishing killer. Let's dive in to discover the truth of what happened to Cynthia Hoffman. Cynthia Hoffman was born in 1999. She came from a large blended family in East Anchorage, Alaska, where she lived in a trailer with her father, siblings, and family friends. Theirs was a vibrant home full of life and laughter. Cynthia's father, Timothy, loved his family with fervor and was fiercely protective, especially over Cynthia, whom he called Cece. We'll also call her Cece as a gesture of respect towards this sweet, loving girl. Cece had learning disabilities. She hadn't done that well in school, having had to switch schools in order to graduate in 2018. According to her father, she had the mental book learning abilities of a 7th grader. Nonetheless, Cece was an active participant in her family life and helped her father run his business, Hoffman Handyman Repair. She and her sisters had learned their father's trade, and Cece had become an adept handyman in her own right. She was capable of measuring windows, churning concrete, and generally working hard to support her father. She was a conscientious, trusting 19-year-old who knew the value of honest work. Still, because of Cece's learning disabilities, her father worried about her. She was a trusting person who only wanted to make friends.
In this family, you all have phones. When Dad calls, you answer.
It was important that Timothy knew where his daughter was when he needed her, and she knew it was important that she pick up the phone. What happened then the day she didn't answer? It was the beginning of June 2019. That weekend, Cece had helped her father prepare a camper for an outing. Her sisters had helped, and their reward was a small amount of cash and a trip to the mall. Cece was supposed to meet up with one of her sisters on Sunday, June 2nd, to collect this reward. She was spending the afternoon with friends, going to the movies. At least this is what she had told her family, but she never showed up to meet her sister, and she never picked up the phone. Cece's father knew she was vulnerable. He immediately felt sick with worry for his missing daughter. He called the police and was told he needed to wait 24 hours to report her missing. As a result, he believed the police weren't taking him seriously when he told them his daughter had learning disabilities and was vulnerable. A spokesperson for Anchorage Police later said that her vulnerability hadn't been in the report. Otherwise, a higher alert would have gone out to the public sooner. But Timothy wasn't going to wait for the authorities' permission. He was a member of the local biking community, and he used that network and his huge family to send out search parties.
I drove my motorcycle through woods and on bike paths. I floored it all over town doing speed limits that I shouldn't have been doing.
He looked wherever he could think of across the local area, but there was no sign of Cece. Hours became days, and she still didn't come home. Cece's friend Angela said she'd dropped Cece off at a local park, Polar Bear Park, on the Sunday afternoon. This would make Angela the last person to see her before her disappearance. Angela and Timothy texted over the next few days when Cece was missing. Angela said things like, "I hope she comes home safely, she's my best friend, and I'm starting to get worried." She also said, "She won't answer me. I think she's ignoring everyone, and I don't trust what she said about that guy. I loved her too. I want the best for her and want her to come back. There was little context given about this guy that Angela didn't trust, but Angela was implying that Cece had gone off with a suspicious character of her own accord, that maybe she'd still come to her senses and return home. But tragically, this was not to be the case. Around dinner time on Tuesday night, 2 days after Cece first went missing, there was a knock on the door of the Hoffmans' trailer. It was the police. They came bearing the news that every parent dreads. The news that Timothy had suspected since the beginning of this awful saga. His daughter had been found dead. Cece's body had been discovered on the bank of the Eklutna River near the hiking trail at Thunderbird Falls on the outskirts of Anchorage. It was a picturesque setting that it turned out had witnessed a horrific crime. Because Cece's death had not been an accident. Her feet had been bound with duct tape, and she'd been shot in the back of the head. So how did she get out there, 20 miles north of home, and who had killed her? Key to investigations like these is the last person who saw the victim alive. Naturally then, police looked at Cece's friend Angela, who had apparently last seen Cece dropping her off at the park on Sunday afternoon. And she'd been texting encouraging things to Cece's father ever since. But there was a darker side to the story. Angela was not this girl's real name. Her name was actually Denali Bremer. She had had a difficult upbringing. She was taken from her biological mother and adopted at age 18 months, leading to Denali's feelings of confusion about her own identity. She liked to go by multiple aliases, like Angela, Angel, and Dakota. She'd gone to high school with Cece, and Cece believed them to be best friends. That was what Denali had told Cece's father, too. But Denali had lied about Cece's whereabouts on Sunday afternoon. 19-year-old Denali had recently reconnected with her biological mother, Nicole House, and they were living together. On Sunday evening, Denali had come home in a distressed emotional state.
She was honestly crying so hard that I couldn't understand what she was saying.
She had brought home a friend whom Nicole believed to be called Anthony, and both young people seemed very upset. Something had obviously happened. Nicole pried for answers. Eventually, Denali confessed that they'd gone to Thunderbird Falls with Cynthia Hoffman and that Denali's friend, supposedly Anthony, had shot Cece in the head.
He was very matter-of-fact about the whole thing, almost glib. When he told me about shooting Cynthia in the head and kicking her body into the water, he laughed. And I will never in my life forget that.
Nicole didn't know whether to believe them. The story seemed too outlandish and too horrific to be true. But the next day, she saw reports about Cece's disappearance, and she knew her daughter had something to do with it, so she phoned the police.
I knew that I couldn't, in good conscience, not come forward with the information that I had.
Police found the body of 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman last night near Thunderbird Falls. She was bound, shot, and placed in a river, killed by a younger teenage boy as her friend stood by. On Tuesday, June 4th, the police read Denali her rights and interviewed her. She said that she, Cece, and Anthony, whose actual name was Caden McIntosh, had been smoking weed together in the valley on Sunday afternoon. They drove towards Anchorage and stopped in a parking lot near Thunderbird Falls. They went into the woods, but instead of following the hiking trail that led to a spectacular 200-foot waterfall, they followed a path parallel to the Eklutna River, walking until they found an isolated clearing. Here, according to Denali, they decided to mess around with duct tape, taking photos of each other. They bound Cece with duct tape around her wrists and ankles. When they put tape over her mouth, according to Denali, she started to panic. They removed the tape from her mouth and hands. In Denali's story, Cece threatened to call the police and tell them Denali and Caden had kidnapped and assaulted her. Meanwhile, Denali was holding her gun. She did not explain why she had brought it with her or why she had it in her hand. She claimed that Caden took the gun from her and used it to shoot Cece once in the back of the head. Cece lay there, twitching, before Caden pushed her into the river. Denali and Caden fled to the parking lot.
According to Denali, it was Caden's idea that Denali text Cece's sister to tell her she'd dropped Cece in the park. Denali did this because she said she was scared of Caden. The pair went back to Anchorage, and there, according to Denali, Caden burned Cece's purse, her ID, some of her clothing, and Denali's gun. The police then interviewed Caden, who corroborated Denali's story. He said he'd blacked out during the event itself, but that he did remember shooting Cece and pushing her into the river. The police searched the spot they described by the river, and they found Cece's body, bound and shot as they'd said, so the police had found the guilty parties. They charged Caden with first-degree murder and evidence tampering. They didn't charge Denali, perhaps satisfied with her story that she'd been scared into complying. But Cece's father was not convinced. He couldn't believe that his daughter would willingly have gone along with any of their plans, including smoking weed.
The only thing I can imagine is she was yelling her daddy's name. And it goes through my head over and over and over again.
As the investigation continued, Timothy would realize that his skepticism was justified because his daughter's murder was far more twisted than it appeared. Police looked into Denali's cell phone records and social media. They discovered that at the time of the killing, she had been continually texting and sending visual media to someone known as Tyler. She had since deleted the conversation from her phone, but investigators were able to recover its content, revealing that Denali had been recording their attack on Cece on her phone and sending it to this Tyler at his own request. What Denali and Caden had portrayed as stupid kids fooling around and making a mistake turned out to be part of a far larger, more sinister plot. This murder was premeditated, and whoever this Tyler was, he was at the heart of it. Denali had previously been pregnant and given the baby up for adoption. Feeling isolated and perhaps still uncertain of her own identity, she then turned to dating apps. In early 2019, Denali had started talking to people all over the country. This included 21-year-old Tyler, who didn't share a last name. He represented himself as a multimillionaire who lived in Kansas. With him, Denali went by the name Angel, and she began to confide in him, growing closer to this stranger she'd only ever spoken to online. He was 2 years older than her and a person of apparent power and influence. Perhaps she felt flattered by the attention, and they began an online relationship. But there was a dark side to this relationship. Tyler shared his dark fantasies with Denali, who seemed to accept them readily. These fantasies became ever more twisted until May, when Tyler offered Denali $9 million if she'd murder someone in Alaska and send him photos or videos of the killing. What drives someone to kill their supposed best friend? The promise of $9 million from a man they'd never met and might be lying about his entire identity? Apparently, this was enough for Denali. She agreed to commit the murder. Denali spoke to 4 of her friends: Caden, 19-year-old Caleb Leyland, and 2 others, and together they hatched a plan to carry out the killing and split the reward. The group selected Cece as their victim, perhaps because of her learning disabilities, which might have made her supposedly an easy target. This choice was approved by Tyler. Denali had told him that Cece was her best friend. The group planned that Caleb Leyland would give Denali and Caden his car on June 2nd to use in the murder. Caleb's share would be $500,000. They brought duct tape and Denali's gun, bought for self-defense with them. They told Cece they were going on a hike. Trustingly and fatally, she believed them.
Cynthia Hoffman was lured to this trail under the guise of going for a hike. One day after she was reported missing, police found her body bound with duct tape along a riverbed not too far from where we are right now. What makes this story all the more disturbing, according to authorities, all 5 teenagers were motivated by money promised to one of them by a man met online, thousands of miles away.
But who was Tyler really? Because he wasn't a Kansas millionaire at all. Investigation revealed that he was actually Darren Schillmiller, a 21-year-old resident of New Salisbury, Indiana. He lived in his adopted grandmother's basement and was considered creepy by those around him. He'd been federally investigated the previous year, and yet he hadn't been put behind bars, leaving him free to instruct Denali and her friends in this awful crime. The photo he had sent Denali of himself was in fact someone else's photo. He had catfished her and convinced her to commit murder based on a total lie. There was no $9 million. Instead, after the murder, Darren tried to blackmail her into attacking other people in Alaska. Luckily, the police caught up with this insidious ring before they could commit another murder. Denali was interviewed again on June 7th, by which point police had discovered a Snapchat video in which she appeared to confess the crime. The group's conspiracy fell apart, nor did Darren, or Tyler as he called himself, escape consequences for what he had done. He was extradited to Alaska, and there each of them faced justice. Caden McIntosh is still awaiting trial, but Caleb Leyland pled guilty to murder and will be sentenced in June. And the two driving forces behind this awful crime, Denali and Darren, have both been sentenced to 99 years in prison, having both pled guilty to first-degree murder.
Ms. Bremer, to the sole remaining charge, count 1 of the indictment, murder in the first degree pursuant to 1141-100A1A, what plea did you want to enter?
Guilty.
All right, I'm going to accept your guilty plea.
On her way from the stand, House paused to say something to her daughter, who's been in jail since 2019.
I told her I loved her, because I do. She's still my daughter. But the choices that she made and the decisions that she made put her in the position she's in right now. And when someone loses their life because of a decision you made, there's got to be consequences for that.
We're here to just show support to the family, let them know that we care. We're not happy with what's happened, that this young life has been taken from us. This is a life that should have been protected.
If we help one kid or one parent to ask a kid what you're doing, where you're going, who you're with, let me look at your phone. If we help one kid, we've accomplished everything. The town of Anchorage is pissed off at what's happening.
To hear you knocking at the door.
All I know is no parent ought to bury a child.
What she would have felt that day. And right now I just feel anger, sadness.
We happened to be born on the exact same day. So we shared a lot of birthdays, a lot of great birthdays together. Not a year is gonna pass where my birthday cake isn't gonna have Cynthia's name on it.
For all we can do is keep it in our hearts and memories and think of all the good times we've had with her. I'm glad we found everybody that was involved. So now she can rest in peace. I love you, Cynthia.
What are your thoughts on this awful story? Was Denali manipulated by a malicious, murderous catfish? Or was she equally to blame in this horrific crime? Until next time, stay safe, keep up with our channel, and we'll see you very soon.